In a nutshell, honest liars are defined by the quality and quantity of self-awareness that's attached to their presentation. Here, Tony openly and directly concedes what he is to his fellow diners, a criminal forced to hustle in order to be able to sit in the room with them. This is merely an explanation of criminal activity, not a justification of it. He tacitly acknowledges that the reality of his identity is so obvious, so transparent, that you'd have to be a fool not to see it. This fact places Tony's brand of deception a layer or two closer to the reality of who he is on the inside. In a sense, Tony's more honest than the people staring at him. And beyond embarrassment, his frustration is born from his awareness of the moral hypocrisy of it all. If Tony's thoughts could be given words, they'd sound something like this. Yes, I'm eating at this table, and no, I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. Unlike you, I had to make my spoon. I had to take my spoon. And under what values do you presume that you're better than me?
I don't have that problem. I always tell the truth, even when I lie.
Tony lands us at an interesting place when he says, "You're not good. You just know how to hide, how to lie. I don't have that problem." Throughout the film, we see Tony continuing to get his hands dirty, even as he moves up the drug game. Unlike the other people in the room, Tony can't easily sell himself on the idea that he's good, certainly not while remaining actively involved in the dark, bloody work that supports his lifestyle. This makes it impossible for Tony to restrict his identity to the material byproducts of his lifestyle: fine dining, luxury cars, and mansions. Despite having creature comforts, Tony lacks a legitimate professional profile, or basically an avatar, to vouch for his decency. Tony's reputation, or lack of one, exposes him as an outsider, and outsiders to these spaces must be bad, because if they're not, they run the risk of implicating the insiders as well.
So say good night to the bad guy. The last time you're gonna see a bad guy like this again, let me tell you. Make way for the bad guy. There's a bad guy coming through. Better get out of his way.
Beyond the requisite self-awareness, the honest liar is differentiated from the typical liar through the disclosure inherent to their presentation. With no cover or reputation to precede him, Tony cannot pretend to be anything other than someone who has sought personal advantage with little regard to consequence. This fact is baked into his presentation and is the primary part of his honest lie. On top of his thick accent, even the subtleties of his posture and facial expression betray any notion that he belongs in that restaurant. And this is all the ammunition the people in the room need to maintain their sense of inherent superiority relative to Tony. But when your wealth can essentially be automated to create its own wealth, and you can easily thrive off of capital earnings as opposed to hustle and labor, you have to have a profound lack of self-awareness to remain in a prolonged state of snobbery and bemoan the lack of enterprise or the moral fitness of others, particularly when your rarefied privilege requires the doing and risking of so little. Before the dynamic Barack Obama arrived on the scene in 2004, boomers and Gen Xers were treated to a trial run of the first charismatic Democratic presidential nominee since JFK. He arrived in the person of William Jefferson Clinton. The Republicans, who had enjoyed their own smooth-talking leader in Ronald Reagan, the great communicator, had just come off of 12 years of owning the White House. But for the Democrats, it was time for a change. They had just lost 3 consecutive elections with the help of their uncharismatic crew of flunkies, all of whom seemed less shiny and cool than their opponents, and all of whom were not compelling enough in the sales department. Enter Bill Clinton, or in the case of the 1998 film Primary Colors, enter Jack Stanton, the embodiment of Clinton, played by John Travolta. Travolta is convincing as Stanton, or Clinton, part of which is owed to his features. The role benefits from Travolta's large face and big, toothy smile, which evoked Clinton's Southern charm. A smart choice of casting, to be sure. Prior to Clinton, the voting public witnessed the lackluster efforts of one-term President Jimmy Carter as well as Walter Mondale and Michael Dukakis, all of whom attempted to appeal to the supposed maturity of the voter to recognize the necessity for sacrifice in the face of late 70s inflation, increasing concerns about energy shortages, and tensions with the former Soviet Union. Sound familiar? But from 1980 to 1992, what was really killing the Democrats before they could get off the ground was their willingness to be more candid than they are today about their desire to raise taxes to achieve their lofty ambitions. And it went over like a lead balloon. Even a sprinkle of honesty, as it turned out, was not the best policy. And the DNC would learn, or relearn, the lesson that when you want to accomplish something, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. Campaigning for the presidency in 1991, despite being a wonk that could break down policy specifics, Bill Clinton was smart enough to emphasize the emotional, pathos, over the rational, logos. The key to effective communication, particularly in advertising and politics, is pandering to the emotional needs of the audience without making it seem like you're doing so. Bill Clinton knew this, and his motion picture stand-in knows it as well.
So I want you to know that I understand what you're doing. I appreciate it. When people say to me, Jack Stan, why do you spend so much time and effort in adult literacy? And I say to them because it gives me a chance to see courage.
Savvy political pundits and disillusioned left-wing voters couldn't help but recognize the smoothness of Bill Clinton's game. It felt different than what they'd been getting, and smelled like victory. And people started to believe in the donkey again, and the ends would justify the means of their honest liar.
And that's the kind of man you want to work for. Somebody who just wants to get elected.
I can tell the difference between a man who believes what I believe and lies about it to get elected and a man who just doesn't give a f***. And I'll take the liar.
Our liar, liar, and honest liar concepts can be taken further by recognizing the subjective and fluid nature of both. One can easily be mistaken for the other, and both can bleed into the other. And a person can mutate from liar, liar to honest liar based on the savviness of the audience or the simple passage of sufficient time, because most lies or grifts have an expiration date. At the point when the spiel or grift expires and people have figured out the act, a formerly convincing liar, liar becomes an honest liar automatically. This is because in order to tell a lie, you have to know the truth. Of course, this means that liars, as a rule, already know the truth. And once that truth is acknowledged, either by the liar or the person being lied to, the continued faux sincerity of the liar, liar becomes irrelevant, and the act ineffective. And when this happens, a liar, liar is rendered a de facto honest liar, or more accurately, an exposed liar. It's no longer under their control. The only hope for exposed liars is to find new, unsuspecting populations of suckers to start the grift all over again. Unfortunately, this can and does happen, well beyond the anecdotal level. It's why some of the major moral lessons of civilizations in history are often cyclical. In fact, it's our children and the youth of any culture or country that are always the next potentially vulnerable marks for advertisers, demagogues, and the media writ large. Keeping the next generations ignorant merely comes at the expense of the entire world.